I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that you are standing on a really freezing, totally isolated mountain peak.
Right, yeah.
You are, nearly 2,800 meters up in the air. The wind is just absolutely howling. The air is incredibly thin. And you're staring at these limestone ruins of an ancient temple.
Oh, wow.
Yeah? And as you stand there shivering, I really want you to consider this. Because according to ancient texts, this exact spot, this very mountain, is where rebellious angels first touched down on Earth.
It is, it's a stunning visual, isn't it? Like, the idea that cosmic rebellion, the actual literal origin of evil, has a physical earthly address that you could just, punch into a GPS.
Exactly. I mean, that is the journey we are going on in today's deep dive. We are tracking the DNA of the fallen angel.
Yeah, the origin story.
Right. Every time you watch a movie with a brooding anti-hero or read a book about a misunderstood rebel fighting the system, you are looking at a character whose origin story was basically forged on that exact mountain.
It's incredible.
So we're going to trace how this myth evolved from scattered geographical sites and some truly wild translation errors all the way to the glamorous, tragic hero of romantic poetry.
Yeah, and to map that out, we are drawing on two very different, but honestly completely complementary sources today.
Yep.
First, we have these extensive archaeological records and geographical surveys detailing the ancient temples of Mount Hermon in the Middle East. And we're pairing that physical evidence with this really comprehensive PhD thesis that explores the myth of the fallen angel in English and French romantic poetry, tracing the literary and theological evolution of the character.
So we're basically watching humanity invent its ultimate scapegoat in real time. It's wild. But let's start back on that freezing peak. Where exactly in the world are we standing?
Well, we are on Mount Hermon. It's this massive, rugged mountain ridge that currently, straddles the borders of present-day Israel, Syria, and Lebanon. It's the highest point in the region. Like, if you were to hike it today, you would see these incredibly steep, dissolving limestone cliffs full of hidden caves leading up to snow-capped peaks that feed into the Jordan River system.
Wow.
But what makes this mountain so vital to our story is that scattered across its slopes and right on the summit are more than 24 ancient shrines and cult sites.
24? I mean, that is a massive amount of real estate dedicated to ancient worship on a mountain that actively seems to want to kill you.
Right. It is a staggering concentration of sites. And the bulk of these structures were erected during the Roman era, so roughly the 1st to the 4th centuries AD.
Okay, got it.
And what you see in the architecture is basically a classic ancient rebrand. Originally, the Canaanite people venerated a storm god known as Baal Hermon on this peak.
Which I guess makes perfect sense. I mean, if your survival relies on rain for your crops, you worship the deity who controls the violent storms that gather on the highest mountain.
Exactly. You go straight to the source of the weather. But as the Greeks and then the Romans swept in and took over the region, they didn't just, erase the local god. They merged Baal Hermon with the Greek Zeus, and later the Roman Jupiter.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the core attributes of a mountain storm deity were just adapted to fit whoever happened to be running the empire at the time.
Right, just a new coat of paint.
Yeah, exactly. And the absolute crown jewel of this religious complex is a site right at the summit called Quasar Antar. At 2,814 meters above sea level, it is the highest temple known from the entire ancient world.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if I am an ancient architect or, just an ancient person wanting to pray for rain, hauling heavy limestone blocks to 2,814 meters, where the climate is incredibly harsh and covered in snow for part of the year, it seems completely illogical.
It really does.
I mean, building a temple up there isn't about convenience for the local congregation. It feels more like an ancient exclusivity filter. The mountain itself is the bouncer. Getting in is like getting into the ultimate exclusive VIP room.
That is precisely it. The extreme isolation wasn't a bug in the design. It was the entire point.
Real?
Yeah, when archaeologists survey these high-altitude sites, what they find, or rather what they specifically do not find, is the key. There is virtually no domestic debris.
Oh, wow.
No signs of everyday living, no cooking pots, no daily refuse that you would see if people lived there continuously or even visited casually.
So no one is just like popping up there for a Sunday service.
Not at all. The archaeological evidence suggests these sites were meant for highly elite initiatory rites and the swearing of serious oaths.
Wow.
Getting there was a brutal pilgrimage. When you finally arrived at Khazar Antar, you were standing in this oval stone plateau open to the sky.
Which just sounds incredible.
It does. And we know from surveys dating back to the 1800s that there was a Greek inscription there invoking the greatest and holy God. It was a place designed for, profound, secretive spiritual encounters.
And that extreme isolation didn't just keep casual worshipers away. It basically made Mount Hermon the perfect setting for a story about beings who wanted to hide from the ultimate authority.
Exactly.
Because Mount Hermon isn't just an archaeological curiosity. Like, if we look at the apocryphal Book of Enoch, this mountain is the exact spot where the alternate origin story of evil kicks off.
Yes, specifically a section of that text called the Book of the Watchers.
Right.
Now, the Book of Enoch was hugely influential in antiquity, but it was ultimately left out of the canonical Bible by the later church. According to chapter 6 of this text, Mount Hermon is the precise location where 200 angels, known as the Watchers, descended to earth to swear a mutual secretive pact.
And here is where the story completely deviates from the version most people know today. Because in the traditional mainstream story, the angel, who we usually call Lucifer, falls because of sheer arrogance.
Right, the pride narrative.
Yeah, he wants to usurp God. There was a massive cosmic war in heaven, and he gets violently cast out. But the Watchers in the Book of Enoch, they don't get kicked out.
They don't. In the Enochic narrative, these angels, led by a figure named Semjaza, are not driven by pride or a desire to, sit on God's throne.
No.
They are driven by lust. They look down from heaven, see human women, and they willingly abandon their divine posts because they desire them. They literally walk away from paradise for physical attraction.
It is such a human motivation. But it isn't just a story about rogue angels chasing romance.
No, definitely not.
Because they don't just show up empty-handed. There is another major player in this pact, an angel named Azazel, who brings some highly questionable housewarming gifts.
Yeah, Azazel's a fascinating figure. He functions almost like a biblical Prometheus. He is a maker angel, like a craftsman of heaven.
Okay.
And once he is on Earth, he starts sharing forbidden divine knowledge with humanity. He teaches people metallurgy, how to forge swords, knives, and shields.
Which is pretty intense.
It is. But he also teaches them how to make mirrors and cosmetics, specifically how to shadow their eyes with antimony.
So they give early humanity weapons of war and eyeshadow.
Yeah, basically, yes.
Which sounds like a totally wild combination. But when you think about it, Azazel is essentially handing us the tools for violence and vanity. He's giving us the exact mechanisms to destroy ourselves and obsess over ourselves.
That is exactly the theological point the text is making. The corruption of humanity isn't just spiritual, it's technological and societal.
Right.
And the text goes further, claiming that there were darker physical consequences to this pact. It states that the Watchers fathered a race of giants known as the Nephilim with these human women, and these giants proceeded to ravage the earth, consuming everything in their path.
Which, to be clear to you listening, is a theological device. Modern fringe theories love to latch onto the giant aspect, but extensive archaeological excavations all around Mount Hermon and the wider region have found zero empirical evidence of giant human bones.
None at all.
Yeah, the Nephilim are a metaphor meant to explain the existence of overwhelming violence and chaos in the ancient world, not a biological reality found in the dirt. We impartially have to look at the data here.
Exactly. It was a way for ancient people to make sense of a terrifying, brutal world by blaming an influx of corrupted divine DNA.
But that leaves us with a massive historical puzzle.
It does.
Because if the original rebel angels were just love-struck runaways who taught people how to forge daggers and apply eyeliner, how in the world did we end up with the terrifying story of a singular, incredibly proud angel orchestrating a cosmic war and being cast into hell?
Well, to understand that massive transformation and to understand where the famous name Lucifer even comes from, we have to leave the slopes of Mount Hermon and look at what is essentially the greatest game of theological telephone in human history.
I love that phrase, theological telephone. Let's trace the actual word. Because Lucifer doesn't start out as a name at all, does it?
It really doesn't. It starts in the Old Testament,
Hmm.
specifically in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14.
Okay.
And importantly, it is not about an angel. Isaiah is writing a political diss track, essentially.
What?
Yeah, he is issuing a warning to a proud human Babylonian king who arrogantly thinks he is as great as God. Isaiah mocks this king by comparing him to the morning star, which in the original Hebrew is Hela ben Sahar.
Hel ben Sahar.
Yes. And this is a direct reference to the planet Venus, which appears brilliantly bright in the early morning sky, but is quickly blotted out or brought down the exact moment the actual sun rises.
Okay, so step one. It is just a poetic metaphor comparing a human king's fleeting power to the planet Venus. How does that turn into an immortal demon?
Step 2 is the translation into Greek. When Jewish scholars translated the Hebrew text into Greek, they needed an equivalent for morning star. They chose the word Hiosphoros.
Right.
But in Greek culture, that word carries heavy connections to the myth of Phaeton, the arrogant mortal boy who tried to drive the sun god's chariot, lost control, and was violently struck down by Zeus, falling from the sky to save the earth.
Oh, wow. So just by switching languages, the idea of a literal physical fall from the sky gets injected into a text that was originally just a political metaphor.
Yes. The cultural baggage of the Greek language totally altered the imagery. And then it shifts again.
Of course it does.
Centuries later, when the text was translated into Latin by St. Jerome to create the Vulgate, he looked for the Latin equivalent for morning star or light bringer. That Latin word is Lucifer, spelled with a lowercase l.
Wait, so it's literally just a noun?
Yes, it was a completely standard noun, but much later, when the King James English version of the Bible was translated, the scholars made a stylistic choice that changed history.
What did they do?
They took that Latin noun, left it untranslated, and capitalized it. They turned a concept into a proper name, Lucifer.
That is incredible. A mistranslation of a metaphor for a Babylonian king accidentally gives birth to the name of the ultimate supervillain.
It's wild.
But, I mean, a cool name and a vague idea falling from the sky still doesn't give us a cohesive backstory. How did the church actually construct the narrative of the angelic rebellion?
Well, what's fascinating here is that this is where the early church fathers step in. Specifically, scholars like Origen and later St. Augustine. They were operating like detectives, piecing together a massive conspiracy board.
I can picture the red string right now.
Exactly. They took scattered scraps from entirely different books of the Bible. They took Isaiah's morning star. Then they looked at the book of Revelation at the very end of the Bible, which describes a dragon battling the archangel Michael.
Okay.
Then they looked at the Gospel of Luke, where Jesus says, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven.
It's like they were assembling a movie trailer from 5 completely different films to invent a brand new overarching antagonist.
That's exactly what they did. And St. Augustine is the one who essentially codified the timeline to make all these disparate parts work together.
Why did he need to do that?
Because Augustine had a massive PR problem on his hands as a theologian. If God is perfectly good, all-knowing, and created absolutely everything, where did evil come from?
Right, the classic problem of evil.
Yeah. He couldn't blame God, and blaming frail, newly created humans for the entirety of cosmic evil felt, frankly, insufficient. He needed a scapegoat.
So he constructs a timeline where the angel falls before humanity even gets to the garden.
Precisely. In his work, City of God, Augustine argued that the devil was an angel who fell due to immense pride before Adam and Eve were even in the picture.
Oh, I see.
The original sin wasn't humans eating an apple. It was an angel looking at God and thinking, I should be in charge. This solved Augustine's theological problem. It explained the presence of evil without blaming the creator, and it placed the cosmic blame entirely on the arrogance of a single powerful spirit.
Okay, so by the Middle Ages, we have this theological patchwork fully assembled. We have a name, Lucifer. We have a motive, pride. And we have a timeline that predates humanity.
We do.
But for centuries, this is just an academic framework. And frankly, the devil they ended up with was more of a grotesque monster than a compelling character.
That is very true. If you look at how the medieval devil was portrayed, he isn't someone you'd want to write a beautiful poem about.
Definitely not.
He is physically repulsive. He has cloven hooves, a tail, a sulfurous smell. If you read Dante's Inferno from the 14th century, Lucifer is a massive, weeping, three-headed bat trapped in a frozen lake at the center of hell, mindlessly and mechanically chewing on history's greatest traitors.
He is an obstacle. He is a monster. He has literally no psychological interiority.
None. He's a boss fight, essentially.
Exactly. A boss fight, not a literary hero. So how do we get from a weeping bat in a frozen lake to the charismatic, brooding anti-hero of the modern era.
That entire shift rests almost entirely on the shoulders of one man, the English poet John Milton.
Ah, Milton.
Yeah. In 1674, Milton published his epic poem, Paradise Lost. Milton took the Church Fathers' framework and, for the first time in history, gave Satan a rich, conflicted psychological biography.
Wow.
Milton's Satan isn't just a cackling monster. He feels blinding hatred and jealousy, yes, but he also feels deep hesitation, agonizing pain, and profound remorse for the paradise he has lost. He gives him that iconic, defiant line, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven." I mean, Milton essentially gives the villain the absolute best dialogue in the entire epic.
He really does. Milton's stated intention was to write a poem justifying the ways of God to men. But in the process of making his villain a worthy adversary, he created a character so dynamic, so fiercely independent, that readers couldn't help but be captivated by him.
Right.
Satan in Paradise Lost is fighting an impossible war against an omnipotent dictator, and his refusal to surrender, even when he knows he is doomed, makes him deeply compelling. Milton accidentally invented the literary Satan.
And that invention hits the timeline at the exact right moment. Because, so what does this all mean? If we fast forward to the 18th and 19th centuries, the Romantic era, the world is practically begging for a character who refuses to bow to absolute authority.
Exactly. You have to look at the societal backdrop of Europe at this time. It was an era of massive violent upheaval. You had the American Revolution throwing off the king. You had the French Revolution entirely dismantling a centuries-old monarchy and pushing back against the dogmatic control of the state church.
Oh, yeah.
At the same time, the Industrial Revolution was crushing the working class under a new kind of economic tyranny.
Right, the air is literally thick with smoke and the idea of rebellion. So when Romantic writers in England and France look around for a symbol of ultimate defiance, they don't look to saints or kings, they look to Milton's Satan.
Yes. Writers like Lord Byron in England and Alfred de Vigny and Victor Hugo in France latched onto this figure.
Hold on, though. You're talking about massive cultural icons here. Are you saying the guy who wrote Les Miserables was secretly running a satanic cult on the weekends?
No.
Or is this purely a literary device?
It is purely symbolic, and we want to impartially report on this. They were absolutely not devil worshippers in a religious sense. As Europe was rapidly secularizing, these writers stripped the fallen angel of his literal theological evil and elevated him as a powerful literary symbol.
Okay, that makes sense.
To the Romantics, Satan was the ultimate underdog. He was a tragic, beautiful figure fighting against an unyielding, omnipotent hegemony. When a poet in Paris during a revolution looked at Satan, they saw a mirror for their own political struggles.
Wow.
Satan became the patron saint of humanity's quest for identity, independence, and freedom from tyranny.
It is a breathtaking pivot.
Yeah.
He goes from being the literal source of all cosmic evil to being the poster child for political liberty and human rights.
Quite the rebrand.
Truly. But of all the artists who tackled this myth, no one blurred the lines between the tragic rebel and the ancient texts, quite like the English poet and artist William Blake. Because Blake didn't just write about rebellion, he brought the entire story full circle right back to the Book of Enoch.
Yes, Blake is a totally unique visionary in this landscape. He completely rejects both the medieval monster and the standard biblical narrative.
And here's where it gets really interesting. I was looking at these illustrations Blake did late in his life, around 1824 to 1827. He was commissioned by a friend named John Linnell to illustrate the Book of Enoch.
Right, which had recently been rediscovered, brought back to Europe, and translated into English.
Yes. And the visual choices Blake makes in these sketches are incredibly subversive. When he draws the Watchers descending to Earth to mate with human women, he draws them completely naked, hypersexualized, with massive halos of light. But crucially, he draws them without wings.
That specific detail is profound. By stripping the angels of their wings, Blake is visually arguing that they aren't ethereal, untouchable angels in the traditional medieval sense.
Okay.
He is linking them back to the sons of God mentioned in Genesis 6. He is humanizing them, forcing the viewer to confront a shared divine and mortal lineage without all the baggage of church iconography.
And he doesn't just radically change the angels. In one of the sketches, he draws the human women who mate with the Watchers, transforming into scaly mermaids or sirens.
Right. While the ancient text of Enoch simply says the women will be judged alongside the corrupted angels, Blake visualizes them as active, powerful participants who are fundamentally transformed by the encounter. They aren't just passive victims, they're changed into creatures of myth themselves. But the most revealing aspect of Blake's entire series of illustrations is how he portrays the ultimate authority, how he portrays God.
The figure he calls the Great Glory.
Yes, Blake draws God as a massive, severe, and genuinely sinister-looking figure. For Blake, who spent his life pushing back against rigid dogmatic religion and societal rules, the true villain of the ancient story wasn't the angels who followed their passions, and it certainly wasn't the women.
Okay.
In Blake's artistic framing, and again, just reporting his perspective here impartially, the God of the Old Testament was an overly proud, merciless tyrant who was willing to wipe out the entire earth with a flood just because his subjects didn't obey perfectly.
It completely flips the entire script of the origin of evil.
Hmm.
Instead of the angel falling because of sinful pride, God is the one exhibiting tyrannical, destructive pride. Blake's art frames the angels and the human women as victims of an unforgiving absolute patriarchy.
Exactly. Blake uses the oldest version of the myth we have, the Watchers on Mount Hermon, to launch a direct critique at the very concept of unquestioning obedience to authority.
Which really brings this entire journey into focus. Why do we constantly rewrite this specific story?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, whether it's ancient Canaanites on Mount Hermon praying for rain, or church fathers trying to explain the existence of evil, or romantic poets fighting for political liberty, the story of the fallen angel is the ultimate blank canvas.
A blank canvas for what?
For humanity's shifting relationship with authority.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, we started this deep dive, shivering on the freezing limestone peaks of Mount Hermon, looking at the birthplace of an ancient secret pact.
We did.
We traced how a Greek translation quirk turned a political insult about a morning star into a cosmic supervillain.
Theological telephone.
Right. And we saw how John Milton gave that villain a beating, remorseful heart, how the Romantics used him to fuel revolutions, and how William Blake used him to challenge the very nature of divine authority.
It is a profound evolution. It's a story that grew, splintered, and adapted right alongside our own societal growing pains.
So the next time you are reading a book or watching a movie and you find yourself actively rooting for the charismatic antihero or the brooding rebel fighting a corrupt system, remember that you are seeing the echoes of a myth forged over thousands of years.
Yeah, that's so true.
It is a myth we actively built to help us process our own incredibly flawed, rebellious nature.
It definitely makes you look at every rebel narrative and every underdog story a little differently.
It really does. Which leaves us with one final thought to mull over as we wrap up. If humanity had never invented the myth of the fallen angel to act as a cosmic scapegoat for the darkness in the world, would we have been forced to take full responsibility for our own violence and vanity centuries sooner?
Oh, that's a good question.
And what does our modern, enduring obsession with misunderstood villains say about the authorities we are expected to serve today?